Hey there, Raelan here. So a few people have asked me over the past few months to put together a summary of all of the recovery interviews I've done for chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, here on my channel. And although I thought that was a great idea and I was really grateful for the suggestion, I have to admit that I was procrastinating a bit because I've done dozens of interviews now and I haven't been keeping track of that information in any really kind of way. If I could go back to my first interview, I would have started a spreadsheet and just been keeping track of the key recovery themes and takeaways, so I'd have all that information. But I didn't have that information. So I knew it was going to take a while. But then I got another big kick to stop procrastinating and pull this all together when Dan Newfer reached out to me and wanted to interview me for his podcast, which I was excited and honored to take part because he does ME CFS recovery interviews as well. He's been doing them for many years. So he thought it would be a great idea for us to come together and share all of the insights and all of the takeaways from all of the interviews that we've done and have that all together in one place. So that was the final kick I needed to finally put all this information together. So in this video, I'm going to go through what the main themes that I have seen in all of these stories, what the people who fully recovered did, the things that they didn't do, what those different strategies are that were working for them, where some of the places are where people got stuck and what helped them to get past that, along with some of the more concerning things that I hear in interviews about where people are really struggling and just some thoughts on how we can address that, along with just any other main key points or themes or takeaways from all of these full recovery stories. I think these interviews have a lot to offer. That being said, I think it's important to remember that all of this is anecdotal. Nothing here is scientific research. I'm just sharing information and sharing stories from the people that I've talked to. So a good place to start, I think, from the themes that I've taken away from everyone who I've interviewed is the themes with people leading up to when they got ME CFS. And now it's not everybody that I've talked to, but it was a lot of people who said something eerily similar. And my own experience also was the same. And what that was that people were in a state in their life where they had been overexerting themselves mentally or physically or both. They'd been burning the candle at both ends and pushing themselves really hard, whether, some of them were extreme athletes and training for ultra marathons. Some people, might be going to school or working two jobs or a single parent and just juggling a lot of things. And most people I've spoken to, and myself included, thought of themselves as pretty healthy at the time. A lot of them were extreme exercisers and so forth, but in retrospect can see that they actually weren't taking very good care of themselves at all, and that their stress levels were extremely high and they were exhausted and on a definite path for some sort of burnout. And then a sort of perfect storm happens that their body is not in a great state, and then they get some sort of blow, whether a mental blow or a physical blow that their body just can't recover from. So it might be they get a virus or some mold or chemical exposure, or they're in a car accident, or someone close to them dies. Something stressful, something hard on the mind or the body happens, and they just can't seem to recover. And themes with recovery. So when I look at all the people that I've spoken to that have fully recovered, I'll start a bit general, the overarching themes from those people in their recovery journeys, and then I'll bring it a bit more specific. So when we look at the themes for people who did recover from ME CFS, by far the biggest thing that I hear is actually around mindset. And as I always say, I think it's something that we take for granted, but I think it's incredibly important. That virtually every one of these people said to me that they reached a point where they were so determined to get past this, and they believed 100% that they could, and they just refused to give up until they got there. I'm not saying this on your own is going to make you recover from conditions like ME CFS, but just looking at themes, there was that determination in getting well and a refusal to give up, and a belief that recovery was possible, even if they hadn't ever heard of anyone else who'd ever recovered. They just felt it, in their heart, in their soul, that they were going to get past this. And this doesn't mean that every minute of every day they were determined and ready to go and all motivated. Virtually every one of these people shared many periods of severe depression and hopelessness. It was, up and down. But when they got down, they were able to pull themselves back out of it and not stay there too long and get that determination and that stubbornness back. Another general theme that I have taken away from these recovery interviews is that for people to finally get past this, the majority of them had to figure out how to get out of that boom bust cycle. Because understandably, with conditions like ME, CFS, I think a lot of us get a little bit stuck in this pattern of we feel a little bit better, so we really push ourselves and we do all the things that we aren't able to do on the days when we're not feeling so well. But then we pay a huge price tag for it. So it's a sort of, one step forward, one step back, or one step forward and 8 steps back. And I think it's really hard to recover when you don't have that level of acceptance for your limitations. And what I took away from all of these interviews is that people got to a place where they found that acceptance as much as they could. Not acceptance that they would never recover, but acceptance that they had certain limitations in the moment and that they had to respect those and they had to pace themselves so that they weren't continually crashing and setting themselves back. Another theme that I heard is that people began to appreciate how important it was to manage their stress. And I've talked a lot about this on this channel, and a lot of people are talking about this right now, which I think is really great. We are understanding more and more how important it is to manage our stress if we want our body and our nervous system to be in a state that is actually capable of healing, where those healing systems are engaged. So the people that I talked to that recovered, many of them said things like, oh, I didn't believe in meditation and that all just sounded like mumbo jumbo. But then I started meditating and I started doing these different things throughout the day to help keep my stress levels down. And I went to counseling and I started journaling and so forth. So another theme for sure from virtually everyone that I talked to is that for them to recover, they had to get their stress under control. They had to get themselves in a more calm state throughout the day and to use various tools and strategies and support systems to help them do that. Now, another thing that I heard from virtually everyone I talked to who recovered was that when they finally did, they got really serious about their recovery. And I know we can't always be in this 100% focused healing zone because sometimes these things stretch on for years and I think we get burnt out from focusing so much on our recovery, and sometimes it just feels like life must go on. But virtually everyone that I talked to made their recovery an absolute focus. I think it probably was coming from a place of desperation. That's what I picked up from a few people. That was my own experience for sure. But for whatever reason, people decided this is it. This is it. I'm going to make myself the priority as much as possible. I'm going to scale back other things in my life and I'm going to put everything I have into this. Like this one shot, this is it. Like I am doing it. I am doing this now, and deprioritizing all those other things in life that tend to take our attention and our energy that we need to get past something like this. And the last general theme that I heard from people who recovered is that they very much had to listen to their gut and trust their intuition. That mimicking anyone else that they saw online or anyone else's protocol to the letter wasn't their path out of this. That there wasn't a one-size-fits-all plan, and they really needed to think about what resonated for them. And many people said things like, oh, I heard about this and I just knew. I knew this was it. And, something just clicks. So trusting yourself, being the expert on your own body, being open-minded, trying new things, of course, taking in information from other people. But ultimately, there's something inside of us, I think, that just sometimes just knows. We hear something and like, that's just right. This is it. This is what I need. And just as there are themes with what I've seen from people who recover what they do, there's also themes when I went back through these interviews that I noticed of what these people don't do. And one of the things that I definitely noticed is that nobody said that they rested their way out of this. And I think it's a natural response when you get something like chronic fatigue syndrome and you're exhausted, among many other symptoms, that you just think I'll rest and I'll feel better. And that's definitely what I did when I first became unwell. I thought, okay, I've been pushing myself to the limit. I crashed. I just need to rest. And for months, I rested and I got worse. So not a single person that I talked to said, I just really needed to rest. I really just needed to lay there, let my body heal, and everything was better. That being said, virtually everyone said that rest was a big part of their recovery process, and that's part of the pacing and the managing your energy. But nobody said that rest alone got them out of this. And also, what nobody in these interviews said was that relying on that hope strategy worked for them, where you just hope that it'll go away, and you do nothing and it just goes away all on its own. Now, perhaps there are people out there that just wait it out and it just passes, but I'm sharing, the people that I've talked to and the people that I've interviewed, and no one that I've spoken to has yet to say that to me, unfortunately. And the last general theme I'll share of what I didn't hear from people was things around diet. Your diet's always a big one and a confusing one because there's so much conflicting information out there. So although there were themes with diet, there was a lot of variation as well. But what no one said to me was I kept eating junk food, or I ate a bunch of processed food and drank a bunch of alcohol and I got better. Virtually everyone I talked to had to make adjustments to their diet to make it more whole foods, get rid of the processed stuff. A lot of people omitted things like sugar and caffeine. Gluten was big for a lot of people. Quite a few people seriously upped their plant intake or went fully plant-based, but not everybody did. So the theme would be from diet that I take away from this is it is important, but there isn't a one-size-fits-all plan. So going off what everyone has shared, in my experience echoes this as well, is that it's important to clean up your diet. But exactly what that looks like is going to vary for you. I mean, there was one interview I did where the woman recovered by switching to a 100% carnivore diet. So it really seems to vary. But cutting out the garbage, making it more natural seems, at least in the people that I've talked to be really important. That being said, not a single person said to me that their diet had to be perfect. So people made a lot of changes and cleaned things up a lot, but everyone still had little allowances for whatever that might be. So I don't think we need to make changes, but not get so stressed and so bogged down in perfection. I think that's going to work against us. So work hard, be disciplined, but you can have the odd treat or slip up here and there and you're still going to be okay. All right, so moving on to the specific things that people shared in videos that help them to fully recover from ME/CFS. Now, the more interviews I do, the more convinced I am that there are so many paths out of this. There were some themes among a few of them, but overall, it's a really broad spectrum of things that have worked for people. So what those things are that people shared with me that help them to fully recover are things like someone used a form of frog poison that's rubbed on your skin, Cambo, and that allowed them to fully recover. Some people switched to a vegan diet, a whole food plant-based diet, and credit that for the bulk of their recovery. As I mentioned, someone used a carnivore diet, and that was key for them. Quite a few people talked about things like using an anti-inflammatory diet, and a good chunk of the interviews that I've done credit a big amount of their recovery to various brain retraining programs. And it isn't one specific one, but there are quite a few different ones that people have reported to be incredibly helpful for them. Some other things people have found are things like energy medicine, also graded exercise therapy and movement has been important for a few people. And quite a few people mentioned even if incorporating movement into their program wasn't the main thing that got them out, it was a piece of it. And it was something that they used as they recovered to help pull themselves out of this. People talked about healing trauma to recover. One person used Ayurvedic medicine to fully recover from severe ME/CFS. So that's the traditional Indian medicine system. Quite a few people talked about restoring their gut health through various ways, whether through diet, and specifically what that diet looked like varied from person to person, also through things like fasting and supplements and so forth. And another big one that people credited as being a major part of their recovery was finally dealing with the stress in their life. And not only dealing with the stress in their life, but getting their life more in line with a life that they actually wanted to be living. So people found that big sources of stress for them were that they were in the wrong relationship, or they worked in the wrong career, they were in the wrong field, something that really just didn't fit for who they were as a person. People also talked about recovering from things like mold poisoning, so getting testing done and identifying that, and then doing specific treatments to deal with that, as well as addressing mineral deficiencies. That was one that was brought up a couple of times through hair mineral analysis tests, identifying those deficiencies and then treating it accordingly. And another one that came up a couple of times was people following the protocols from the medical medium. So that's the gist of the big things. There are dozens of more small things that people mentioned, and it would take me forever to mention them all. But if we look at what people attribute as the core thing that helped them recover, those are the things that I've heard. Also, in quite a few of these stories, people shared that they got stuck at various points in their journey and talked about why they thought that was. And one of the things that came up quite a few times is that people just shifted their focus from recovery. It's not that they gave up entirely, they just weren't putting their all in anymore. And this seemed to happen for a variety of reasons. It could be because they had made a partial recovery, so now they are able to function in two different things. And because of that, they felt that either they felt guilt about devoting so much of their time to not focusing on recovery, or they felt the bills and the mortgage were calling, so they needed to get back to work. But something happened and they shifted their focus from themselves onto external things. Some people also just got burnt out with their recovery methods. After putting everything they had into trying to recover for so long, it's understandable that people just reach a point where like, I just can't do anymore. And even if they could, you also reach a point where I think it just feels like there's nothing left to try. I've tried everything else that's out there. And there's also a lot of gaslighting that I heard from virtually every person that I talked to that comes at them, whether through friends or family members or the medical community. So people who are, telling them it's all in their head, or that condition isn't real, it's just something that is invalidating their experience, or telling them that what they think is happening to them isn't actually happening. And then going over these interviews and these stories again, there were also some really concerning themes for what people were going through. And one of them is what people experience when they first get diagnosed. What I heard a lot is that for many people, when they get a diagnosis of ME or CFS, ME/CFS, whatever it might be, anything in that spectrum, for quite a few people, there's a small period of hope and excitement. Like, yay, I have a label to attach to this. I know what I'm dealing with. I can tackle this. But quite often, even before they leave the doctor's office, that hope is gone from either what the doctor is telling them about the prognosis for this illness and that there is no recognized treatment. And some people are hearing that people don't recover, or virtually no one recovers. So there's a lot of hopeless information out there. And I do not at all blame doctors. They are only working with the information that they have. And then people go home and they Google it, and it gets even more depressing, because the bulk of what is out there online, what people are telling me, is that it is very depressing and hopeless, and just not a lot of concrete stuff that's really helpful. So this not only really saddens me and breaks my heart to think of all the people out there who are getting this diagnosis and this is what they're facing, but the concerning thing about it, beyond what a horrible experience this must be for people going through this, is that our minds are really powerful. So when we initially get what feels like such a hopeless diagnosis and a hopeless prognosis, this can cement some expectations in our mind around recovery. And many, many people do recover from ME/CFS. There are tons out there, but they're not getting tracked anywhere. The vast majority of people who recover do so outside of mainstream medicine. So there's just no way to track that. And not a single person I've talked to has been like, yes, I've been tallied in some sort of study. It's just the numbers out there, in my opinion, that you see online around recovery, the percentages that you see are not accurate. So this is very concerning to me, that this is what people with ME/CFS are getting straight out the gate. Because it's like, what hope do you have when you're going into it with that mindset? So I'm working hard, and many people are working hard to turn that around and to get more information out there that creates a more accurate picture of what this looks like for people, and that there is hope, and many people do recover, and this is not at all hopeless. So I really hope that we can do more and more over time to change that experience for people. And the other concerning thing that I hear from so many of the people that I've talked to is, even the most determined and motivated ones had bouts of severe depression with this illness, and at various points in their health journey had thoughts about taking their own life. And some people did actually even attempt to take their own life. So I think we put a lot of focus on the physical symptoms, with ME/CFS. And I think, from where I'm sitting and what I've heard, that focus needs to shift, and we need to put our focus on our mental health and on taking care of our mindset and our depression, because without addressing that, nothing else that you do is really going to matter. And when you're in that severely depressed state, how are you supposed to be able to keep picking yourself back up every day and doing all those things you need to do to get yourself out of this? And we are losing people. My own mother took her own life after decades with this illness. We are losing many people because of this illness. And it's not even when it's at its most severe. I myself had times where I was feeling very low and suicidal on my own journey with this. And it wasn't always even when my symptoms were the worst. Sometimes it's just when it had been dragging on so long and I just didn't feel like I could keep going and things just felt hopeless. And I don't think for any of us, it's that we don't want to live. It's just that we want the struggle to stop and we've lost hope that it ever will. So I think these are really important things that we need to address. We need to put a lot of focus into getting the recovery stories out there so that people have that hope, and then really driving home that focusing on mental health is really important, and in my opinion, should be the core of your whole recovery program. And I'll finish off with sharing just some general core takeaways that I get when I listen to all of these stories and when I went back and reviewed them all. And one of them, and perhaps the most encouraging, is that even in the most dire of circumstances, people who are severely ill or people who have been unwell for decades fully recover. So there is always hope. No matter what your situation looks like, there are people in similar situations that are fully recovering. And I know in the moment, it can feel like that's going to be impossible, but so many people do. So I think that's a really great takeaway from all of this. Another takeaway that I got, what people shared that I've spoken to, is that you need to be a bit ruthless in determining what you surround yourself with, whether that be people, sources of information, social media, because if you have things around you that are bringing you down, that are depressing you, that are telling you that recovery is impossible, people that are gaslighting you and telling you you're wrong, your experience is not valid, all of these things are major roadblocks to recovery for the people that I've talked to, and myself as well. So it's important to have support and have people around you, but just be really careful about choosing who those people are and what those social media and information spaces are. Another definite takeaway from all of these interviews is that there is no one-size-fits-all plan, which, is good and bad. It would be nice if there was one, because then we could just put it out there, everybody do this, and you will be better. But the good news from this, I think, is that just because something that worked for someone else didn't work for you, it doesn't mean that you're not going to recover. It just means that that isn't what you needed. So it's a bit more work and you have to keep trying and experimenting and researching, but there are lots of different things that work for people. And another takeaway from the people that I talk to is that finding a source of hope and inspiration is mandatory. So do things in your life that keep your focus where you need to be and help to keep you optimistic, whether that's having daily affirmations that you say, or some quotes on your computer, or being a part of a healthy, optimistic, recovery-focused support group online, or getting professional counseling, or working with a health coach, or putting things up on your wall that, vision boards and things that remind you of where you're trying to go. But just put a lot of focus into holding on to that hope and that inspiration, because this can be very, very challenging to get through. So you're going to need something to help lift you up and inspire you every day so you can keep doing all those things you need to do. Another theme that I hear is that you need to break out of that self-judgment cycle. And I think that is a part of that whole thing of keeping our stress down and working with our nervous system and keeping it in the right state it needs to be in to heal. I think it's very easy to be hard on ourselves when either we're not sticking to plans that we made. Oh, I said I was going to do this and then I didn't, or whatever it is. I pushed myself too hard and I crashed and now I'm paying a price. Why do I never learn? Why do I keep making the same mistakes? How am I here again? And this judgment and this shame comes in, and this really gets us nowhere, because this is a puzzle really to be solved. So it's been important for people that I talk to, and myself as well, to remove the emotion out of it and just stand back and look at things from a place of curiosity, from like as a neutral third party. Just look at the situation and evaluate it without judgment, without shame. Okay, I said I was going to meditate every second day this week and I didn't. So what happened? Why didn't that happen? Maybe that's not a realistic schedule. Maybe that's not something you can manage. Or maybe you didn't put some reminders up for yourself and you just need to put some cues in your environment. Or maybe you need to schedule it. It needs to happen at a certain time of day. So it's not blaming yourself. It's not judging yourself. It's just taking that out of it and being compassionate with yourself, being kind to yourself and forgiving and understanding that this is a process and that none of this is your fault and that nobody is doing it perfectly. All right, so there you have it. There is a general overview of the dozens of interviews that I have done for ME CFS recovery on this channel. I hope you found something in here helpful. And if not, keep looking. Don't give up. Your answer is out there. And if you're looking for ways to get more hope and inspiration into your life, one thing that I found very helpful was to make a vision board. And if you're interested in learning more about how I made mine and some tips on how to best make yours, and you haven't already seen this video, I'll link it up on the screen here if you'd like to check it out. That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.